I'm Megan. Standing in the grand ballroom of Crystal Gardens, I'm surrounded by the echoes of a past humiliation. The very spot where I was once labeled a housekeeper now holds the promise of a new beginning. It's been a year since that fateful night, a year filled with revenge, justice, and the discovery of my own strength. My husband, Ethan, and his family thought they could diminish me, but little did they know they were setting the stage for their own downfall. Ethan worked at Summit Capital, a prestigious financial firm, and his mother, Diana, was a socialite who ruled the Chicago elite with an iron fist. His sister, Lily, was engaged to Ryan, a tech startup founder with big dreams and even bigger lies. I remember the day I first suspected Ethan's betrayal. It was a Friday afternoon, and I'd come home early from a client meeting. As I walked past our bedroom, I heard Ethan on the phone with Diana. "Mom's right. She needs to learn her place. The housekeeper badge at Lily's engagement party will be perfect. It'll teach her a lesson." I stood there, frozen, the laundry basket in my hands. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For 5 years, I'd been the perfect wife. I woke up at 5:45 every morning to make Ethan's coffee and review reports for the failing businesses I was restructuring. I'd built my own consulting firm, Phoenix Advisory, from the ground up, using just $5,000 in savings and a whole lot of determination. But to Ethan, my success was just a little project. 6 months ago, I'd noticed some discrepancies in Ethan's work files. He'd grown careless, leaving documents from Summit Capital lying around. I'm no financial novice, and I quickly realized he was embezzling money from the firm. I started collecting evidence, taking photos, and creating encrypted backups. I even consulted with a former federal prosecutor, Olivia, who confirmed that it was a criminal offense. I'd hoped I'd never have to use this evidence, but after overhearing Ethan's conversation, I knew it was time to take action. I sat down at my home office and began drafting an anonymous SEC whistleblower report. As I worked, I could hear Ethan and Diana planning my humiliation at the engagement party. They talked about how there would be no chair for me at the table, how I'd be labeled a staff, and how everyone would laugh at me. 2 weeks before the engagement party, Lily showed up at our townhouse in tears. She'd been having second thoughts about her engagement to Ryan. He was pressuring her to get married quickly before his startup went public and had presented her with a pre-nuptial agreement that seemed unfair. I could tell something was off, so I did what I do best. I started researching. I discovered that Ryan's fintech startup, Quantum Payments, was a fraud. The user growth numbers were inflated, and the banking partnerships were just letters of intent. He was using Lily's trust fund to keep his failing business afloat. I documented everything in a secure folder, but I knew I had to wait for the right time to tell Lily. A few days later, Diana called me. She claimed there was an urgent estate tax issue and needed $50,000 by the end of the month. I knew it was a lie, but I played along. I transferred the money and immediately hired a forensic accountant through Phoenix Advisory. He discovered that Diana had hidden $2.3 million in offshore accounts during her divorce from Ethan's uncle. She'd claimed poverty in court to get a large alimony payment. Meanwhile, Ethan had become distant. He'd missed our anniversary dinner and my birthday. Every Friday, he'd have emergency partner meetings at a fancy hotel. I hired an investigator and found out he was having an affair with his colleague, Ava. I had photos and credit card receipts as proof. The invitation to Lily's engagement party arrived, addressed only to Ethan. When I asked about my invitation, he said Diana must have forgotten. I knew it was deliberate. He told me to wear something understated so I wouldn't outshine the bride. On the night of the engagement party, I put on a simple black dress and prepared for battle. Ethan left 2 hours early for client drinks. I drove to Crystal Gardens alone, my hands steady on the steering wheel. As I walked into the lobby, I could hear Ethan's colleagues whispering about me. "That's the one who thinks she's a business consultant." They laughed, but I held my head high. At the check-in table, the young woman struggled to find my name. Then, Diana appeared, wearing a champagne-colored Chanel suit. She presented me with a badge that read Megan, housekeeper. "You're just staff here," she announced, her voice carrying across the lobby. I clipped the badge to my dress and walked into the ballroom. There was no chair for me at our table. I stood there, watching as Diana's friends noticed the missing chair and my badge. Ethan arrived 40 minutes later, smelling of Ava's perfume. He saw me standing there, saw the missing chair, and laughed. "Relax, Megan. Food is for family." In that moment, I felt a clarity that comes when a marriage dies. I reached for my wedding ring, the 2-carat diamond Ethan had chosen to impress his partners. I pulled it off slowly, letting the light catch the facets. I placed it on the table and said, "Then I'm no longer yours." I turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the chaos. In the parking garage, I called my colleague Jake. "Execute Project Revelation," I said. Jake had been working with me on a plan to expose Ethan's embezzlement. He confirmed that the asset freeze protocols were initiating and the SEC filing was ready for submission. I drove home and uploaded the evidence to the SEC's whistleblower portal. Ethan called me multiple times, but I let the calls go to voicemail. His messages went from angry to desperate. The next morning, Olivia came to my house. She laid out the evidence of Ethan's infidelity and embezzlement, as well as Diana's offshore accounts. She explained that we had a strong case and that Ethan's career was over. Later that day, Lily came to me with the evidence she'd gathered about Ryan's fraud. We sat in my kitchen and talked about how to protect her. I gave her Olivia's card and promised to cover the legal fees. Over the next few days, the dominoes started to fall. Diana's offshore accounts were frozen, and she was facing clawback provisions. Ethan's meltdown at the office was caught on security footage and went viral. His partners distanced themselves from him, and he was placed on indefinite leave. Ryan's startup collapsed, and Lily called off the engagement. She used the money from selling her engagement ring to fund her MBA at a top business school. On Thursday, Jake came to me with an opportunity. Crystal Gardens, the venue where I'd been humiliated, was in financial trouble. They were asking $2 million but would take $800,000 cash. I didn't hesitate. I decided to buy it. I signed the acquisition papers, knowing that I was taking control of the space where I'd been shamed. I announced that Crystal Gardens would operate under new principles: no hierarchical seating, no demeaning name badges, and equal treatment for all guests. As I stood in the ballroom a year later, surrounded by friends and colleagues who had supported me through this journey, I felt a sense of peace. The housekeeper badge, now framed on the wall of my new office, was a reminder of how far I'd come. Ethan was now working as a junior analyst in a small firm in another city, living with his parents. Diana was working as a receptionist in a dental practice, using a new name. And I was building Phoenix Advisory into Chicago's premier restructuring firm, helping struggling businesses and families. The housekeeper badge had been meant to put me in my place, but instead, it had set me free. I'd built a new life, one where respect and dignity were non-negotiable.